Okay, go to mef.net/POCs for more info and stay tuned for announcements to see these exciting POCs in action. Well, we've almost got this topic of digital transformation surrounded. We have market insights from analysts and views from industry execs from around the globe. I think it's time to add another perspective. That, of course, is MEF, specifically from CTO Pascal Menezes.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here at this Infinite Edge series on digital transformation. What a great topic. So let me just get right into it. As you know, digital transformation is a massive, massive growing trend in industry. It is estimated to be $11.5 trillion and growing massively. And every industry, as we know it, is transforming and digitizing their workflows and transforming how they do business. And this is really critical. And really at the heart of this digital transformation is really network transformation. And network transformation is very critical because it is the underpinning for digital transformation. So what I will cover really is what is MEF doing in digital transformation and specifically network transformation. As you know, MEF is a nonprofit organization really made up from service providers and technology vendors initially, now cloud providers. And really what we've been doing is at the heart is delivering standardization, a service standardization, and now adding in automation APIs, interoperable automation APIs, and certification. And these three areas are critical, as you'll see coming up here, on the underpinning for digital transformation. And it really empowers an enterprise on the digital transformational journey. So let's get into the details exactly on why this is so important. As you know, COVID has come in and has created a tremendous change in our environments. But I'd like to say that even before COVID came in, we were experiencing this idea of a user-centric network. Now, what do I mean by user-centric network? A user-centric network is a network that's highly temporal, highly mobile and fluid, that has seemingly infinite edges. And there, the idea is a user should be able to work from anywhere, where they're home, their corporate offices, or mobile, or the hotels, and they should be able to access their data and their applications and information wherever that might reside. And as you know, more and more information is moving to the cloud, IT is moving to the cloud, and that's a hybrid multi-cloud scenario, and including being distributed now, the cloud being distributed, and they should be able to access that from wherever they are. And this is very, very critical. So one of the key goals is on a user-centric network is to enable a frictionless experience from wherever they are to wherever they want to go. There should be this idea of a frictionless experience. And what do I mean by frictionless experience? Really what I'm talking about is the idea is that a user should be able to use their applications from wherever they are and not have to think about the performance of how the user application should just be working flawlessly. Additionally, they shouldn't have to think about security and malware and whether they're going to get attacked and whether it's a home or a coffee shop or on Wi-Fi. They should not have to think about it. Users don't have that sophistication of IT or ICT, and they shouldn't have to think about it. And really, if you think about it, at the heart of this whole paradigm of a frictionless experience is the idea of an ecosystem. And this ecosystem consists of three major islands. You have the cloud providers, where the IT systems are more and more living on, whether it be private clouds or public clouds and so on. And they are enabling a frictionless experience. You have the service providers that are also going through their transformational journey of network transformation and enabling a frictionless experience. And then you have the enterprise doing the exact same thing, enabling a frictionless experience for their user base. And all this is done through automation and automation APIs, through various virtualization technologies and software-defined networks. And together, all of this is glued together, and these islands have to come together to work flawlessly. And really what we see this in the frictionless goal is really end-to-end automation. End-to-end automation is very, very critical because it enables the idea of these three islands to come together, to work together. And we see machines in these three different islands working together. And we at MEF are working not only on the service definitions, which I'll go into details, but on these inter-provider or these east-west APIs, and to deliver interoperable and deliver an automation experience to enable this frictionless end goal. So let me get into details really about why standardization is important, because I know people always kind of think about, well, do we really need standards? We all want to do open source, and open source has its value for sure. And it's just like open source delivers to the rich ecosystem of vendors and technology providers and so on, the ability to then innovate and have a common base to innovate upon. What we're doing at MEF and standardization is a very similar kind of objective. We're delivering three fundamental values. We're delivering the idea of standardization to remove market confusion, and that drives adoption massively and drives it very fast, and it raises all boats. The tide raises all ships, and everybody wins, and I'll go into the details of that. The second one is, as I talked about, as automation's flowing in, interoperability is critical because machines don't understand, like human beings, nuances in language. They have to be very explicit in their language. And what we're doing in automation, especially APIs, is it providing interoperable APIs, specifically in the east-west directions, but also in north-south direction. I'll go into the details of that. And then finally, certification. Subscribers want to buy services, and they want to be able to understand what they're buying and knowing that services are certified so they don't have to test it themselves to make sure that service works. So let me go into the details of this and round this up with an analogy. The first one is on service standardization. What MEF has done with Carrier Ethernet is really outstanding. When Ethernet was in the LAN in 2001 and had to go in the wire area front, MEF was the sole authority that drove, Ethernet beyond the LAN and the WAN, and has created 80 billion plus market and growing rapidly still. And with that, what MEF has done is define this idea of vocabulary, language, behavior, construct, and attributes that, regardless of how a provider implements it, the subscriber knows and understands what they're buying. And this removes market confusion. And this is very important. And I'll wrap this up with an analogy to show you what I'm talking about. And now MEF is doing that not only for Carrier Ethernet, we're doing that for SD-WAN, we're doing that for SASE, and I'll talk more about all the standardization we're doing. The second part is, as I talked about, interoperability. Machines have to have a very explicit language, and they have to be able to talk to each other, specifically between autonomies, between these three different islands of enterprises, service provider, cloud providers. There has to be very, very good interoperable APIs. And here we're doing a lot of work on Sonata and Cantata, and I'll go into the details of that. And what this enables is this idea of this frictionless experience I described, this user-centric network that can be enabled wherever users are, wherever they want to go, regardless of what the friction, whatever the ecosystem looks like in between of all these different providers, cloud providers, enterprises. It's all done through machine automation, and I'll go through the details of that in a second. And then finally, certification, as I talked about, removes market confusion. It also enables the idea when a customer or subscriber buys a service, they feel confident that the service is going to work, and they don't have to test everything to make sure it works. And let me now wrap all of this up in a great analogy. If I wanted to buy a TV and there was no standardization, no interoperability, and no certification, it would be a real mess. And let me give you an example. I'd walk in the store, I'd tell the salesman I want a big screen TV, I want to work for all kinds of video formats, all kinds of definition formats. I want to be able to connect to my stereo systems. I want to connect stream cable shows from the internet and use my Wi-Fi. I want to connect to my cable systems. And I would say, just give me the TV to do that. And I would explain that. And without standardization and interoperability and certification, I bring that TV home and I try to plug it together and it wouldn't work. And it wouldn't work for many reasons because we didn't have all these things I talked about. And as a customer, I'd bring it back and say, it doesn't work. And this would drive massive confusion within all the consumers buying TVs. Same thing we're trying to do here. What MEF does is remove that confusion so that when we plug in that TV into the stereos, into the Wi-Fi, stream all that content, it all works because it all follows a standard definition, an agreement of how things should work. We call that standards. And we agree upon how interoperability should work, including what Wi-Fi is, and as it plugs to a Wi-Fi network or it plugs into my stereo system with HDMI, it just works. And then we know through certification that when that TV has Wi-Fi built in it, it just works with the Wi-Fi in my home. Or when I use HDMI, I know the certification of the cable and the unit, the TV and my stereo works together. So that also works. So that's a great analogy of really what we're trying to do and what we're delivering on value in the industry on digital transformation. So MEF is really working specifically on 4 major areas that you can take away. One is this idea of enabling network transformation for a very high-speed underlay. Now, we've been doing this for Carrier Ethernet, which is a very high-speed fabric connecting operators worldwide all over the place from a retail wholesale business. So they're already connected with their high-speed Ethernet pipes, 100 gigabits going to 400 gigabits to 800 to 1 terabits per second. And we call that the external network interface connection. But now we've added an IP service definitions, and we've had the ability to automate that underlay for that high-speed fabric between all the providers in a federated way. So whatever point in the globe you want to connect to another point in the globe, you can do that through automation. And so therefore you can ask for an address, you can figure out what services are available, you can order that service, you can get a price quote on it, you can change the bandwidth on it, and so on. All of that done as a cloud-like experience in real time. And we'll talk about why the need for a high-speed underlay and why not just use the internet. And the answer is really simple, is that internet's good for some applications, but for really mission-critical applications and applications emerging around digital services like IoT or massive IoT or AI/ML or AR/VR or even all the line of business applications around digital transformation, they all need a connection to cloud that's solid at the very high-speed pipes. And yes, they can access the edges to those clouds or the service provider network through internet accesses and so on, and then have an overlay on top. And that's kind of the next part we're talking about, is the ability to add in an overlay on top of this high-speed underlay is SD-WAN. And what we've been doing with MEF on SD-WAN is incredible. We deliver the first industry specification on SD-WAN, and we're doing a ton of work around SD-WAN, including Universal WAN, SD-WAN Edge, SD-WAN for various other scenarios, including version 2 and version 3 we'll talk about in a second. And we're also enabling this idea of a highly programmable overlay, which is what SD-WAN represents, which has the ability to be very application-centric and knowledgeable how the performance of the application is, and be able to define the policies from a centralized point of view. So that is really what we're talking about, a really high-speed underlay with a very programmable overlay. Now with that, we're adding the first digital services, which is really around cybersecurity. And here we're doing the idea of specifically the ability to define security functions and enable them, whether it be at the subscriber edges or homes or sites, to within the cloud provider edges or even at service provider edges, and sprinkle those security functions wherever they need to live. Additionally, we're seeing the idea of SASE, the Secure Access Service Edge, come into play, and we're defining standardization around that, where more security is moving to a cloud-like posture at the edges. And there we're doing a lot of work on SASE. And then we're also seeing the emergence of zero trust, this idea of identity and access control, that you just don't come into a network and plug in. You plug into a network and you have to identify yourself, and based on your identity, there's access control policies where application flows, devices users can go to. And it's a very critical area. So there we're doing work on SASE, zero trust, and security functions itself. So with that, we're also adding the final fourth component in edges. Edges is emerging rapidly, and we're doing a ton of work at edges. Let me just talk about what we're doing around edges. As you know, 5G is a very critical aspect around edges, and there we're seeing slicing emerge, and here we're defining end-to-end slicing with 5G. We're also seeing with edges, we're seeing virtualization being very important, and we're defining better modern optimization orchestrational models around orchestrating virtualized services at the edges. And finally, we're incubating the idea of SD-LAN, SD-branch, SD-home. How do you manage the environment of that enterprise environment, whether the user's at home, private 5G in the enterprise, or Industry 4.0, or basically, or when they're mobile. So the idea of looking now and managing the enterprise-facing viewpoint and managing those assets, whether they be in the enterprise, or using private 5G or Wi-Fi, or their home and so on, that is a very, very important trend that's emerging. And we're seeing that showing up with SD-WAN vendors and SASE vendors and SaaS and providers in the services called managed services. And we're seeing Wi-Fi managed services today. We're seeing private 5G managed services emerge. And that is all going to be defining around an SD branch, SD-LAN, and SD-Home scenario. So these are all the 4 areas that MEF are working on. And together, all 4 of them enables digital transformation. So with that, I want to thank you for your time, and take care and have a great day.